live from the heart of Lincoln, America.
Welcome to Ticket Weeknights
On 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
All right, welcome back in to Ticket Weekends. Harrison Arns on the ones and twos, as always, come Sunday mornings. Well, Sunday afternoon now. If you guys want to join in, 402-464-5685. That is the Sartor Heyman text line. If you want to put a face to the voice, as we're debuting a new show today, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, X, Allo, Channel 961. All great ways to do so. In studio for the YWCA Hour, we got Karen and Myeisha, both here. And for this first segment, guys, I think we're just going to get a little bit of background on, how you guys got here and kind of where we're at today here in Lincoln. So, Myeisha, I'll go ahead and start with you. Just give us a little bit of your background to the point. Well, now you're here in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Oh, well, I'm Myeisha Essex, as was said. And how I got to Lincoln, Nebraska was through my family. So, my father, originally from Chicago, and then we moved around kind of the Illinois area. And my father said that he had a job opportunity in Nebraska. And young me, I was in high school. I think I was a freshman in high school at that time. Mm-hmm. And I knew nothing about Nebraska. So when he first said Nebraska, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so cold. Why would we go there? And he's like, that's Alaska. And I'm like, oh, okay, wrong place. But we wind up coming here to Nebraska again when I was a sophomore in high school. And I went to Southeast and had a chance to join a few things. And then I had the opportunity after I graduated from Southeast to go out to Howard University in Washington, D.C. So that was a lot of fun and amazing. Mm-hmm. And then came home for a break and then got into like the nonprofit world and came home for a break after I graduated and then got into the nonprofit world working with kids. And I've been here ever since.
Yeah, I got to ask because I love asking this question, especially student athletes who land up in a fly-by state in Nebraska. What were the first impressions? Like, the cold was real. It's not Alaska cold, but it is cold.
Okay, it was cold, but I am from Chicago.
Okay, so you're a little bit used to it.
I was a little bit used to it. It is really cold. It was a little bit more of a culture shock to me than what I am used to. So that was a little bit different. However, I just really enjoyed a lot of the opportunities that I received when I was in high school and some of the people that I made friends with. So it wound up being a good place for us to relocate and settle down. And, after I graduated from college, I came back because I really did enjoy the city of Lincoln.
Absolutely. And Karen, we'll switch gears here. Mm-hmm. How about you? What kind of a little bit of your origin story, your background, and I'll let you pick where you want to start with it.
Okay. So I'm glad to be here. And I originally came to Nebraska because I wanted to pursue my doctorate degree. And I had been a part of TRIO programs earlier in my career and had visited Lincoln several times in the university and had colleagues here and decided that at that juncture of my life, where my youngest child was now going away to college, my oldest was already away in college, well, maybe I'll go back and pursue that doctorate degree from years ago. So I came to UNL. I was the assistant director of Office of Undergraduate Admissions. That was very interesting. And then that next year, I took the position of director of distance education and worked at UNL for 7 years before moving on to LPS and then into the nonprofit world. It was real interesting for me to select Nebraska because I come from a family that are big Sooner fans.
Oh, boy, yeah. So, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and back from when it was the Big Eight. So I remember when I told my family, I think I'm going to transition to Nebraska. My brother said, oh, my God, Dad's going to be so upset with you. But the fact that, I was coming to be part of the university was real intriguing to me. And Nebraska grabs you. And so after my stint with the university and after me telling everybody in my family I would be back in 3 years, well, it's been about 20. So there you go.
Yeah. What is it about Nebraska that's really, and I'll ask both of you guys, that's really hooked you guys that you're like, you know what, this is a pretty good spot to hang out at, not even just for 1 year, multiple years?
Well, for me, Nebraska has really opened up career opportunities, and especially me coming to the YWCA. I've always had this inkling of work toward diversity and working toward inclusion and equity and fairness, and all those kinds of things have always been real central to my own core values. And so, being here in Nebraska, I've been able to really stretch that work. There is a community that is great that pulls you in, but we have members of our community that I think we need to protect, we need to represent, and we need to seek more inclusiveness. And so that's why I do like being here, because of the career opportunity it's given me. And now it's where I'm more of a Nebraska than I am a Kansas City individual, being originally from Kansas City, Missouri. Other than the Chiefs, I will say that before Myeisha says it.
You're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Yeah. No, I have to say the reason why, I stayed in Nebraska or came back to Nebraska. Again, I was very young. I graduated from college. But before I could even look right or left when I came back after I graduated, Karen snatched me up. So that was
well, true.
Yeah. I've been working with her for a while in different settings and environments and, occupations. So she was able to kind of snatch me up real quick before I looked somewhere else. But really being here in Lincoln, it just has been great to be able to see our community and see ways that we can make it better. And for me to be a part of that has been amazing, and to have opportunities to be a part of different communities and organizations and coalitions that have the same mindset as me of just, we need to just make our community, a place where, all feel included, so that we can continue to attract all of these great, wonderful talent to this city and keep them here. And so to be a part of that is just really great. So that's why I've been here for so long.
Now, you guys are stressing community a lot. Like, at what point does that really start to click to you that this is absolutely important, that there is a strong sense of community where everyone feels like they have a role, a purpose within that small local bubble, or maybe even a bigger bubble? But why is community so important? And I'll ask both of you guys that same question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I think because of the nature of our work and working primarily with women and with families that are typically on the lower socioeconomic status, those that have health disparities, those that may not have the economic situation that would help them to really provide for their families. We see all those clients on a daily basis. We work with those students that are in the Title I schools. So we see the needs that are out there, and we see the gaps that are out there. And so being Lincoln, Nebraska, being in the heartland of America, we are the receiver of a lot of different people that come from across the country and across the water. And so they want to settle here. And Lincoln has a system where everyone is not privy to all the resources that they should have. We believe the resources exist, but we really serve as a conduit to connect a lot of the members of the community with the resources that are there. And it is because of the numbers that come into our organization, we know that there is a big gap that exists.
Yeah. Myeisha, what about you?
Yeah, I have to agree with, of course, everything that Karen is saying. But, with the importance of community and giving back to your community, you have to pour in order to receive or to pour out. And so us coming together to say what's going on in our community, where are we thriving? What can we really put up in a spotlight and say, this is what Lincoln is doing so well, but then what are areas that we feel like we can improve on? And as a community coming together and us all coming together as one to say, hey, here are the areas that we can improve on. Here's what we can do to make sure when people are coming into our city, whether they leave or they stay, they have nothing but nice things to say and great things to say about our community and how welcoming it is. And so it's really important for us to be that for ourselves, but just to be that voice, as you said, in the heartland, to be that example of what it looks like, because people have, a perception of of who we are here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so being able to say, hopefully the good things, we are definitely living up to that. But some of those other stereotypical things that you might think of when you hear Lincoln, Nebraska, that we are combating those things and that we are not that. So just being in and of community is it's great. It's how we all come together. It's how we all decide that we're going to support one another and be here for one another. And I can say that in Lincoln, I know that that's a goal and that's something that we want to do here.
Yeah, and you saying that too, it even puts a little pride in myself. We got to take more pride in being a heartland.
Yeah,
what does that
right.
really mean? Like, what if you're gonna claim that title? You hope it reflects it. And I will say, living in Lincoln long enough for a few years now, I feel like we reflect that pretty well. But I want to ask you guys a little more about your background, and you can be as personal as you want with this. But is there any times in your past where you felt like that community support was lacking for you individually, whether you personally or somebody you even knew? That maybe really even inspired this new path that you guys would go on?
Well, I would say I've definitely seen it here with myself, especially being, a woman of color, a person of color here, being a Black woman. We can definitely see it and feel it when we're not received well or we're not wanted in a space. I mean, we have a lot of things such as, walking into a store and are we being followed? The question of, do I have to make sure the thing that I brought in here, that I bought maybe a week ago, that it's either visible to the camera when I walk in so no one thinks that I took it when I walk out? Certain things like that. Is somebody going to touch my hair today? And all of these things have happened here in Lincoln, which is why I'm bringing it up. And so being able to figure out, well, what's the phenomenon with that and what's going on and why we're having these experiences and what education needs to be had within our community, so that we can understand some of those things are just highly inappropriate, but also creates a space where, I don't feel welcome within that space. I also can say, working within the school systems, some things that I have seen, that some of our kids go through, because it starts there. It really does. It starts that young, where you start to get these social cues about who you are, about what the world or how society sees you. And it starts that young. And going through it myself, in middle school, where I start to understand money in middle school. We always talk about that, about socializing agents, and school is one of them. And when you realize in school, oh, I don't have money, I might be poor. I didn't know that. I didn't know that prior to going to school. I didn't know if I didn't have J's on, that meant something. Like that I had Shacks, not J's, like that.
8th grade is when that really starts clicking. Around
it
8th
really
grade,
does. Like you start, yes, in middle school, you start being like, oh, no, wait, I get free and reduced lunch. I can't bring lunch. So you really start to see some of that, come into play, and that's a cultural thing, right? That's just not. I mean, that's society as well. That's the building that you're in, but it's really cultural in what we decide we're going to teach our kids in regards to structure and things. So it starts that young, and as I said, for some of the other examples, all of that happened to me, here in Lincoln. So there have been times where we can see where we're failing in regards to understanding others' cultural backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Karen, I'm going to ask you the same thing. And again, you can go as personal as you want with it.
Yeah, well, like Myeisha, I still experience those kinds of things quite often. I had shared with a group before that I was at the administrative level, of course, at the university, and on a director level, and my boss at the time made a comment that looking around the room that he felt he had a real diverse leadership team, and started to recant, he had a Latino, he had 7 men, he had 2 women, he had 1 Black, and I said, whoa, hold on. Can't count me twice. I said, I occupy. I'm one person, and so we can't do that. But and it's really a sad narrative because it happens so often, and a lot of times, Myeisha and I both, are being called to do different things in ways of representation. And it is great that people believe that we have the moral, we have the ethic, and we have the voice that we can represent a group, but we're not the only ones. And so we still are in a system where it's still going by numbers. And people are feeling, a quota and think, well, that represents full diversity, and that's all fairness. And it's not that. And it's real hard to go through that every day. And when you notice someone is looking at you in that manner and not really understanding who you are personally, and, being that, I'm on the older end of the spectrum, I would say, by way,
Seasoned is a little term I like to use.
I'll go with seasoned. I appreciate that, Harrison, but it to still be experiencing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It can be disheartening. And like Myeisha said, it starts so young. So we have to really help our young people to understand that this narrative still exists, and this is how society views you. And, being an African American woman, we are often looked upon differently than those from other backgrounds.
And that just makes me think of when we're talking about specific instances and situations. I used to work at a school, and I always say that the girl after me, who was also a black girl, she had it worse because she came after me. So they decided not to remember her name. So they always called her by my name.
Oh my!
And
Lord.
I always said, "Well, I'm just if it was it would have happened if it was flipped. If I would have came second, I'm sure I would have been you, right?" And so they continuously, and we worked there for years, and they would still do that. And so one day I just asked, like, why are you calling her by my name or me, by her name? And it was like, oh, well, I think it's because you all have the same hair. And I said, well, I can see about 10 of y'all with blonde hair, but I know who you are, and what type of space. And it just I always laugh because this other girl that they couldn't remember her name, she actually has a twin, an identical twin. And so that always, like, there is somebody in this world who actually looks like, who looks just like her. It's not me, y'all. Like, we do not look alike at all. And when they said that as an excuse, well, I think it's because y'all have like the same hair. And the type of experience and environment that you now create for me, where you're saying to me that you can't even look at me and take me in. What does that say about my existence here? It's very dehumanizing, especially if I worked here for years and you still can't tell us apart because we may have the same hairstyle one day. Versus I know all of you, and like I said, you all, 10 of y'all have the same blonde hair and streaks and highlights, and I can still tell who you are, because when I talk to you, I am present in that conversation. I am listening to you. I'm taking you in. I value you as a human. But I'm not getting that same respect back. You can't even remember my name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we got a little bit of time here left on this segment, and I do want to dive in, especially with the youth. Just kind of that sense of community, and especially, obviously I'm sitting here as a white, but if you're a person of color, how does that really, what are some of the challenges that go along with that when there really isn't people kind of with that same background as you, and you're maybe struggling to relate, if I'm even kind of phrasing that correctly? What are some of the challenges that, especially in the youth, they might face?
I mean, there are a lot of challenges that we used to work in the middle school, so we got to see it.
Same middle school.
The same middle school. So we used to work there, and I mean, I can give credit to that particular middle school because they did recognize that there was something lacking in the relationship between the students of color and teachers who were not. And so that creates just, if you do not have cultural competency, if you do not seek out different education and trainings on how to connect with people from different backgrounds that have different values and different morals, and they were brought up differently than you, then, it's really hard for you to then connect to them genuinely and authentically. And that was the problem, was that, they weren't able to genuinely build a connection with these families because whether they had bias that they didn't know, unconscious bias, but they also, then you go in and you start to judge the mother who you think is not providing well for their child, but then all of a sudden their child has the new J's on the next day, right? So you're like, oh, your priorities. You start judging, the family where the kid has to help out. right? In the home, you start judging them instead of trying to figure out resources to give them to support them. You wind up judging because your background was so different. So you don't understand. And I'm not saying that it's intentional judgment. Again, that's where the bias and things come in. But you start to do that because you're comparing it to your own background and what you know. And, my mom came to the parent-teacher conferences. Well, there are probably other things as to why she could. And there are other reasons why this parent cannot come to the parent-teacher conference. So let's figure it out. And then let's figure out a way that we can provide resources so that can be there and understand who they are, not through our lens, but through theirs. And so it is very important that we see that.
Yeah. Karen, before we wrap up, if you got anything to add to that, absolutely do so.
Oh, I totally agree with Myeisha. And if we don't address that, we continue to create another generation of disenfranchised young people. And that's where we get into the challenges of civic engagement and those that would want to stay here in this community, because we've created an environment and an experience that does not value them as an individual. And we have to recognize that. And when we take ownership and we recognize that, then we can correct that. And then we do really create an inclusive community. And that's one of the platforms that we have as a YWCA. That's one of the main things that we're doing to help our community.
That's a perfect tease, because on the next segment, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. Next, we'll learn more about the YWCA. So don't go anywhere. Again, this is the debut of the YWCA Hour. We got Myeisha, Karen, both in studio with me, the host of this show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Back to the Ticket Weeknights
on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
All right, welcome back into the debut of the YWCA Hour. We got Karen and Myeisha, both representing the YWCA. And since we got about 15 minutes on this segment here, we're going to go ahead and get into the details of what the YWCA is. So, Myeisha, I understand you got a pretty good understanding nationally of what this is. So I'll let you pick a place to start with it and inform people what it's about.
Absolutely. So YWCA is a national organization. YWCA Lincoln is a local association. And just going back into the histories of YWCA, I know a lot of people here in Lincoln will probably know something of our local association, but just nationally, we actually started in 1855 in England. It came to America in 1858, and it was just a group of women who came together and wanted to figure out how to make life better for women. A very simple statement, but very loaded at the same time. I find that the more simple the statement, the more action is needed for that to, come together. So they just wanted to figure out what are some resources that we can give women. Around that time, we saw a lot of women moving from rural areas into bigger cities, and their occupation was changing as well. So they were going from more domestic work into factory work. And with that, we were seeing that a lot of women were needing support. And also a lot of the women who were coming into the city, they were head of household, self-sustaining. And so we found that like within factories, some of the conditions of long work hours, no breaks, poor ventilation, women were just in very terrible environments within those factories. So we wanted to do something about that. We also saw that women who were deciding to go to work, they were kind of being punished if they had children, because if their children were found without mom being in the home, they were taken and placed in an orphanage permanently. And that was a way to kind of get at women who were deciding to kind of go out on their own, right?
Do you know when that stopped? That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy? Well, the YWCAs were the first in the United States to offer childcare because of that. And YWCA here in Lincoln was a part of the first cohort in America to offer childcare. So that was a way that we decided to, combat and try to figure out some resources to support women who they had to go to work.
Yeah, they needed the money. I'd imagine.
Right.
Otherwise they wouldn't be there.
Exactly. They need the money. And so that was some of the things that we talked about. We are an advocacy group. And one of the big, our first advocacy point that we took on was minimum wage, because a lot of women coming into these bigger cities, they were being enticed actually by prostitution because it paid more. And so that was one of the things that we decided that we would connect with. And that was the first policy in regards to advocacy. YWCA was the Young Women's Christian Association. So if you break up the acronym there, we no longer go by that. In the mid 1960s, we decided to be Christian but open. So that was more, it was a group of women who were Protestant, right? And so all the members were Protestant. And so when that happened in the mid 1960s, it actually opened up for a lot of women who practiced different faiths to come into the organization and be members, but not only that, to take on leadership roles. And then a little bit later, like a decade later in the 1970s, as we all know what was happening here in America, the civil rights movement, we decided that we were going to kind of adopt a statement that we would eliminate racism wherever it exists by any means necessary. So they were not playing when they put the by any means necessary on the end of it as a statement. Eventually, it became a part of our mission, which our official mission in 2009, it kind of went through a lot of different drafts over the years, depending on what was happening within society. But since 2009, our mission has been to eliminate racism, empower women, and to promote freedom, dignity, peace, and justice for all. And so that's how, we've been living out our mission, again, since 2009. We operate within a mission impact framework. So all of YWCAs have to operate within this framework, which is the health and safety of women and girls, economic empowerment and advancement of women and girls, and then also social and racial justice. We have always been at the forefront of different movements here within the United States in regards to women and people of color. You want to continue to be intentional about that as a YWCA. So we have great history here just throughout, again, the United States history and within Lincoln, Nebraska, which Karen will, tell you a little bit more about.
Absolutely. Let's get the local story then right here in Lincoln.
Yeah, it's quite the story, isn't it? So YWCA was one of those conveners of the women's suffrage movement. And we all know how critical that was to the history of our nation. And as Myeisha indicated, Lincoln, Nebraska, we were an early adopter of YWCA. And there were 12 couples that met and decided that they would form a YWCA and established it, received the charter for the organization. And the real challenge for them and their objective was to be this center for women, as Myeisha indicated, that wanted to come into a larger city. So we're talking about women coming from rural Nebraska into Lincoln. And now they wanted to seek employment. They wanted to seek education. Another critical note about the history of the YWCA is that most organizations were on college campuses. And so we still have that real close connection of working with young women as they're pursuing their education. And in Lincoln, we actually started 137 years ago. So that's a lot of decades to be here in a community. And as you would imagine, over the hundreds of years, how our community impact has changed. And most folks know our big building that we had downtown on N Street, right next door to the library. They have fond memories. We hear stories about that all the time of how they learned to swim there. They had girls groups there and, all kinds of fond memories there. And so now once our Ys met at a conference back in the 1960s and voted that they would no longer be separate YWCAs, because another factoid of our history is that we had white YWCAs and we had black YWCAs. And I remember the black YWCA growing up in my hometown of Kansas City, Missouri. And so once they decided that at the national convention, that they would be more powerful. And this was at the urging of Dorothy Height. And we know how critical a figure Dorothy Height was for the civil rights movement. So the YWCA has been so critical in the history of this nation. But here in Lincoln, it spilled over into how we're really going to support women and girls and help them to experience different career options, become more economically stable, pursue other businesses and other opportunities for themselves. So we're real proud of the history that we have here and what we have meant for this community.
Yeah, and it just kind of blows my mind, you guys talking about the history of how far back this thing goes, all the way from England originally.
Yeah.
What are the strengths that just keeps this thing going as strong as it is all the way to 2024 today? It's still strong, still has a major impact on today's culture. What do you believe the strengths and how this thing is really just still being a major factor in helping shape today's culture?
I think because of representing the voice of the feminist movement, representing women that would not have a voice, understanding the impact of racism and how racism goes through health, it goes through business, it goes through education, it goes through all the major institutions. And so our YWCA, our corporate office is actually in Washington, D.C., and they are regularly part of whichever presidential administration that we have in office, and giving voice and helping those leaders to understand the challenges of the individual America, of the various communities across this nation. YWCA has always had sponsors that are very, very powerful. One thing about our organization is that early on, after the turn of the century, Rockefeller understood how women would now come into the workforce, and they needed a safer workforce, against those conditions that Myeisha talked about, and put in place a retirement plan for the YWCA. And that where women would never have to worry about having a retirement plan. So simple things like that. And that's what helps to make us strong. We have over 222 YWCAs across the globe.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah. I think what keeps us going is the fact that we're still needed. So I believe a lot of nonprofits, especially if you are trying to connect with different social issues, would like to not exist at some point. And so, meaning, we don't want the banner to always be eliminating racism.
Right.
We don't want that to always be the fight. And so, we're still going because it's just still needed here, in our community and across, our country and also across the world, because we have YWCA World. And so it's in the fact that we have a lot of people within our communities that also sees that need and want to come together again, as they did all those 38 years here, 37 years here in Lincoln, just coming together to say, hey, now what can we do? And that's the strength of who we are as an organization. It is the individual member of our community that wants to step up and support. And so that's how we continue to be strong, and how we can sustain ourselves is because of community members who are saying, we also see this need. We also agree with you. We are passionate about what you're passionate about. And so we're going to step up and support and amplify your voice as an organization through us and what we do. So that's how we're still here. It's because we rely on, just the different community members who align with our mission to, again, stand beside us.
Some folks want to really help. They don't know how to help. And so we can help them with figuring out different ways that they can support a better community.
Yeah, and I want to ask you this too. We got a little bit of time here left on this segment, so I'll ask you this, and if we got time at the end, maybe we can double down on it. But just going through some of this, what are some of those just really tough areas to reach that, for whatever reason, it's just taken our country a long time to kind of get some of these lessons? Like, obviously, it's been going on for a long time now. What do you think some of those challenges are, of where it's getting better? At least I want to optimistically say I think it is getting better. But what are just some of those challenges to where, for whatever reason, it's still kind of lingering all the way up until 2024?
Well, if you don't know, you don't know. And so that's one of the reasons why we formed our Center for Social Justice and helping people to be aware. Myeisha mentioned earlier about implicit bias. There are within all of us, because of the way we're socialized, our backgrounds, we have different biases. And some of us, we go about every day and not even understand that we need to understand the other individuals. What are they experiencing? What are they going through? Just think about it sometimes, Harrison. If you have grown up in a real small community and everyone looks like you in your community, you don't know about those that are in the greater society. And that's what we want to do. We want to help lift that up, and we want to expose that and pull that back. And those are simple things why we have the different levels of women going into STEM. That's one of the things that we want to help succeed, that women are going into STEM fields at greater fields. We have people that have needs for health care, but they can't get the health care because they can't get the employment they need. And then, it's a snowball effect as to why these challenges exist for these different individuals. Well, the greater society needs to understand that these disparities happen and that these are real. And until we acknowledge those and then we address those, then we are still lagging as a total society and a community.
Yeah. I also think, and just putting it at a very basic level of why we still have these pockets where we have to continue to go back and readjust and look and figure out how to move forward. I also think it's just false narratives out there that leads to people being scared and then placing them into survival mode. And when there's a narrative out there that if somebody else is invited to the table or invited to the room, that means you get put out. Obviously, you go into survival mode because that means you're taking away from me. We hear a lot of that. If they get, then we won't. And that's not necessarily the truth at all when we're talking about creating a community or a world that's a little bit more equitable. It's not about you losing something or you giving up something. It's just about us expanding as a community and as a culture and as a country. We're just expanding, and there's nothing but great things that can come from that. But again, if you have people telling you for some reason that if you expand, you're going to somehow shrink, you will go into survival mode and you'll fight. And even when it doesn't make sense because you really think you're fighting for your survival, you'll hang on to some of these things. And then we find ourselves in our society feeling like, I thought we dealt with this already and we're going back. Well, again, if you have people doubling down on it's going to take away, then we find ourselves refighting again and having to go back and say, look, no, it's not taking away. We're just expanding and we're just growing and we're getting bigger and we're incorporating what needs and what should have a long time ago been incorporated into different spaces. It's just going to make it better.
Yeah, I think that's wise words to go ahead and wrap up this segment with. So don't go anywhere. We got one more left on the other side. The YWCA Hour, again, debuting today. So one more segment. We'll talk to you guys in just a little bit.
Back to the Ticket weeknights
on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
All right, welcome back in a final segment of the debut of the YWCA Hour. And again, we're here with Myeisha and Karen. They will be the host as always. Come forward here every Sunday for this show. To wrap things up here, since we just got a little bit of time left, I'll start with Myeisha and then we'll go to Karen. But we've been talking about the YWCA. We got its background. Why is it important for you, and why do you feel a need to be part of this program, organization?
Yeah, so I've always, since I was little, and we used to have to write papers in middle school about where you see yourself when you get older. One of them, everything I would write down, or one of the things, that I write down is philanthropy. I've always wanted to be involved within my community. And then finding an organization that specifically connects to who I am as a person, as being a female woman, and then also as being a person of color, and really helping me to understand. I mean, I know what I go through, right? But to also understand the different backgrounds that people go through that are also, for example, Black like me, that are also a female, identify as female, and how different that is. I'm constantly learning because here in Lincoln, we have a lot of different people that come from other countries into our city. and they have their own particular and specific background that we connect with as well. So being part of the YWCA really just connects to my passion of being in the community, being of the community, being for the community, and doing my part. And so I get to just look at where we're lacking as a community and how we can be a little bit better, and then figure out what I can do to be a part of that. And there's nothing, I guess, more special or better that you can do with your life than to say, I'm going to be a part of the solution and I'm going to be here.
Yeah, no disagreements there. Karen?
Now you see why I call Myeisha my succession plan. But a lot of the same sentiments for me at this point in my journey in my career. It's all about my grandchildren. And I just see that when I'm no longer here, I want my legacy to be that I did everything I could to represent the best of a Black woman, and that I left a legacy for my grandchildren so that they can have a better opportunity with anything that they want to pursue. And so that's what just burns in me every day. Myeisha mentioned the word passion. Just being a nonprofit worker, professional, you have to have the passion for the work, because it's a lot of long, hard work, but you know that the objective is bigger than you. It's not about you, but it's about what you're doing for others and what you're doing for the greater good. And so that's why I engage and why I do what I do. I love the fact that our mission says the elimination of racism. How tall of an order is that? And that how we work to try to achieve that. So we're chipping away at that every day, and the empowerment of women and girls. You know, growing up as a little Black girl in the 60s in America, you know, I was not chosen for a lot of things. So I just kind of became a fighter. I'm also the youngest of all my siblings. And so, you know, I had my dad behind me that kind of let me do a lot of things. As my mom say, let me get away with a lot of things. But, you know, what my parents instilled in me was that we should be afforded all the opportunities as everyone else that didn't look like us. And so that's always just kind of been my way. I've always talked about fairness. And so this work allows me to completely work toward fairness. And I think finally, my oldest sister would always read this poem called The Dash. And the dash is from your date of birth to the date that you leave this earth. That dash is in between. What does your dash say about you? And that's your whole legacy. That's what everyone will remember about you, how you lived your dash. And I want mine to be that, hey, she really tried. She tried to be fair. She tried to do what was best and be the best that she could be, but leave this legacy for others.
I think those are perfect words to go ahead and wrap up on. And again, shout out to you guys. It's a great debut for your first show, and it's not the last
Harrison.
We're going to hear about
Thank
the
you.
YWCA. We'll be on again next week. So be sure to tune in every Sunday. This will be from 1 to 2 p.m. But this is not the end of Ticket weekends here on this Sunday. We'll keep it rolling. We'll talk to you guys in just a little bit.
Thank you.